afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Brown for Shake It Up, the podcast. Imagine slowly being robbed of everything you love, your hobbies, your ability to eat out without making a mess, your ability to do your job properly. Imagine becoming a burden to your spouse and your loved ones. This was me a few months ago, and this is a daily occurrence to the 4 to 10 million people in the United States suffering from essential tremor. That's what this podcast is all about. Everything to do with essential tremor. I ended up, after trying all the medications and everything else and having pretty severe side effects from them. Luckily, I qualified for what is called DBS surgery, deep brain stimulation. And I went ahead and had that in July of this year. And although I thought I'd done my homework before I had the surgery, it was only after my surgery that I really started delving into things and discovered this whole community of people who pretty much feel disenfranchised. That is the reason for the podcast. I looked around trying to find something similar done by just a layperson such as myself, and I'm not saying they don't exist, but I couldn't find them. So I decided then and there to not only champion my cause, but to really get into what is essential tremor. I want people to have an understanding. I'll tell you a little story that happened to me a number of years ago. I was waiting downtown at a bar with a couple of relatives from out of town who didn't know me in the day-to-day. But when we were all served our beers, I couldn't pick mine up. They'd filled it too full. Now, after this, I realized, if you're going to order beer and they're going to, and it's going to fill up the glass, you need to have, and this is workaround number one, you need to have a straw. So I became very cognizant of the need for that. Now, after the first beer, as we all know, alcohol really quiets down essential tremor. And I was no exception to that. So anyway, to get back to the story, these relatives looked at me like, oh, what's going on here? And finally, one of them said, Steve, and that's when I knew what direction he was going in, and I said, you understand I have a neurological disorder. I don't think I called it that because I didn't really think of essential tremor as a neurological disorder, but it's the most prevalent one in the United States. Anyway, I made it very clear that my shaky hands was not due to the need for alcohol. It was because of essential tremor. Now, I don't want to get into too much of the treatments available out there today. Today is just an introductory thing. It's probably will be somewhat shorter than my typical podcast. I'm shooting for between 30 and 45 minutes because it is my hope that once the word gets out that I'm out there, that people will step up and want to be interviewed. I already have some interest from the IETF, the International Essential Tremor Foundation. And because I think they recognize that there are very few resources like this one out there. Instead, what I really want to talk about is the other half of the equation. The thing that never gets discussed. And those are the relatives and the loved ones of those who suffer from essential tremor. It affects virtually every aspect of your life. I've heard people talk about, feeding time at the zoo, that type of thing. And there are times where I have felt like that myself. By the way, as far as my treatment, while it is not a perfect solution, it is not a cure for essential tremor, but it does afford me a lot of relief. I don't my hands don't get out of control like they used to. And I would say that the tremor is somewhere between 90 and 95% gone at this point. And while it is around Christmas, the jingling in the background is one of my official observers, Angelo the dog. So hopefully you can bear with that a little bit. I started to talk about the people who suffer with us. It is not easy. So many. It was an educational thing where I had to make people realize, because the first thing, if somebody loves you, what's the first thing that's going to happen when you can't cut your steak? Oh dear, let me do that for you. No, I want to do it myself, as most people do. Yes, there are times where you would get so frustrated, it's like, oh, screw it. Go ahead, cut the damn steak. Make me feel like a baby. And I never said that, but that's kind of what you feel like. Think back when you were 5 years old. Mommy, will you cut this up for me? That's kind of the feeling that goes through your head. So, along with all the other problems with essential tremor, was this lack of independence. Well, let's talk about essential tremor a little bit. There are kids as young as 2 that have been diagnosed with essential tremor. When I went into and did my research post-surgery, and by the way, we will talk about DBS in detail in an episode. I'm hoping that I can get somebody from the clinic that did mine to join us there to talk about DBS surgery. By the way, if you're interested, I can be found on YouTube. If you Google my name, Steve Brown, and Essential Tremor, I will pop up. The local news channel did a feature on me, and you can meet both my neurosurgeon and my neurologist. So things in that area are very good, and I have no complaints. But anyway, kids as young as 2. There is a woman who's pretty famous on Instagram. I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. Shakey Nan. Her tremor, far worse than mine ever was. But my tremor was more when I tried to do fine, like try to hang a curtain rod or put a nail in a wall to hang a picture. It just, you went nuts, your hand. And so you come up with all these ways to stabilize yourself, embrace this, embrace that. That was the sort of tremor I had. Now, where it really got bad was if, like I said, fine motor control. But let's say I was carrying a cup of coffee into my wife in the morning. I was never sure which hand was going to be the bad one that day. And I would literally get halfway in there. I know this sounds like an old joke. I would get halfway in there and have to turn around and find something to set it down on. Because my hand, I could feel it, was about to go crazy. As I called it at the time, wonky. It was a horrible feeling. And honestly, I'm 5 months after post-surgery, and there are still times where I can't believe that I can now lift this with my right hand, because my right was far worse than my left. So anyway, you're going to hear me repeat this over and over and over. It is my opinion that essential tremor is a thief. It robs everybody afflicted with loss of motor control, the ability to do everyday activities, and ultimately your dignity. It just strips you of it because people assume all kinds of things. Oh, is that Parkinson's? No. Even though essential tremor is, I think I heard one estimate, 10 times more common than Parkinson's. It does not get the reputation. We will, in a future episode, discuss treatments. One of the problems with essential tremor is they don't know what causes it. They don't even know why DBS, deep brain stimulation, works. They just know that it does. And in the 30 or 40 years that it's been legal in the United States, it has gotten far more mechanized, I guess is the better way to put it, far more computerized than what it was in the past. I'm kind of going through my notes here to make sure that I haven't really skipped over anything, and I'm amazed that I got through it as quickly as I did. But for this podcast to not only survive, but to thrive, I really need your input. I want to hear your stories. That's what's going to make this interesting, because each one of us is different. I told you about Shakey Nan, assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. My own story, both have essential tremor. In each case, it manifests itself quite differently. Now, some of you who, well, you really don't know me, so you wouldn't, there's a slight slurring of my speech. That is an effect of the DBS. I'm a pretty articulate fellow, but there are times, particularly when I get excited, as I am right now. This is my first podcast. If somebody told me 2 years ago, Steve, you're going to have a podcast in 2 years, I'd have said, you're nuts. But that's another story, and I'll share that with you a little later if there's time. But anyway, I need your input. I need to know all of the manifestations. In other words, I need to know how it's affected your life. I am actively looking for people to interview, as I indicated at least once before. So, by the way, long about our third episode. This is number 1. Number 2, I'm going to talk about various treatments. Number 3, I'm going to interview somebody who I've known for a few years, my older brother. He also suffers from essential tremor, as did our father and his father. So it's nothing new to our family. Larry's is different than mine. That's my brother. Larry's is different than mine in how it manifests itself. And I'll save the surprise for when we're interviewing him. Okay, you can find me on Facebook as Shake It Up, the podcast, and Instagram, same thing, Shake It Up, the podcast. I wanted to just use Shake It Up, couldn't do it, and because it was already taken. And then I realized, obviously it's a pretty common name. I am having some difficulty getting the correct profile on both Instagram and Facebook. So if you can't find me now, you will in a week or two. And I'm taping this just between Christmas and New Year's in 2023. And I hope to have this up within 2 weeks. I want to talk a little bit about, I mentioned people as young as 2 have been identified with essential tremor. Mine was a little different. I didn't really have the shakes unless I was extremely, I sued a former employer. My hands wouldn't stop. This was 25 years ago. My hands were just going nuts. The magistrate in the court even looked at me and thought, what's this guy trying to do? Well, am I supposed to wear a sign? Don't mind me, I have essential tremor. Maybe there should be. But other things that, notable events that, after the fact, you look back and you say, was this essential tremor? Well, anything related for me, Steve Brown, for me, anything that would spike my adrenaline would be something that I would consider suspect. I used to play classical guitar. And if I had time, I would still be playing it. But the problem is that when I sat down for my first recital, everything was fine until I attempted to move my fingers on the strings. And by the way, I was no slouch. I was a decent player. My teacher wanted me to start teaching myself. Not teaching myself, but become a guitar teacher for first and second year students. And it is ironic, about a week ago, I finally got hold of that guitar teacher, Mr. Ken Hummer. I don't think he'll mind me plugging him a little bit. But if you Google him, he's got a website and stuff, currently living on the East Coast somewhere. He moved from Toledo. And he loves to transcribe music, got books out, got some nice videos and stuff on YouTube. So check him out. But I finally got a hold of him because his local number obviously had been disconnected. And I just really wanted to connect. I wanted him to understand what was really going on because he was as flummoxed as I was. Well, that's what it was. Essential Tremor. It strikes again. Well, I've indicated a number of things about myself so far, and since I do have time here, I'm shooting for 30 minutes, and we're well shy of that. I have been married since 1977. I have 2 daughters. All 3 of these people, in addition to the rest of my family, have been extremely supportive of my tremor and the problems that I've had. A few of my neighbors have even recognized it for what it was. But here's the funny part. I've always enjoyed working with my hands, and this is what I was robbed of more than anything else. Let's see. I made a list because I knew I'd forget some. My first career was as a jeweler and a lapidary. I used to cut gemstones. That kind of stopped. I was into ham radio. I still am a woodworker. I still love my photography, and I'm getting more and more into videography, video editing and stuff. And I teach computer art. Now, the computer aspect of things, there were certain things that I could not use, like Wacom makes these tablets. I don't expect you to understand this, but it's highly intuitive, and you use it kind of like you'd use drawing paper. The problem is that with my hands as bad as they were, everything came out looking like a jagged line, which they basically were. So I was confined to a mouse, but I would have to guide the mouse two-handed. Any of you so afflicted, remember that workaround? I literally would just move them together, and I am right-handed, and I never got the hang of using the mouse left-handed, but I still would have had to guide it. It's just one of those things. Rebuilding houses, our first couple of homes, the way that we made any money from them was sweat equity. I'm mentioning all of this because it's just, for those of you who might be listening who don't have essential tremor or have it in a very minor way, it's nasty. It just takes everything from you. So, once again, and to kind of summarize, who is this podcast for? It's for and the numbers vary greatly. There are between 4 and 10 million people who have essential tremor. There are roughly 20,000 diagnosed with it every year. And the diagnosis is not automatic. There is actually, for it to be essential tremor, there almost has to be a rhythm to it. Like if you try to draw a straight line, it winds up looking more like a heartbeat, with the way it goes. But it's fairly regular. There's probably an equal amount, 4 to 10 million, of spouses, loved ones, and everything else. So basically, if you're affected by essential tremor, we're looking at a target audience here of 20 million people. That's a lot. Even if you don't listen to every episode, that's a lot of people. What's the current population? 340 million? So you look at that, and you're still dealing with 8% of the population, 7%. Not doing my math very well in my head, but you get the idea. It's and those people are the ones that I am mainly addressing this to. I want to get the word out. Okay. I kind of want to wrap things up because me just blathering on and on and on has got to be boring as spit. But to recap, this podcast is for everyone who is affected by essential tremor or who wants to learn about essential tremor. I hope to bring some knowledge, can't think of a better term, some awareness, to use a very overused term, to the malady, to the neurological condition that is essential tremor. So thank you for listening to this inaugural broadcast of Shake It Up. We hope to see you soon, or at least hear you soon. Our next episode will include a description of current treatment options, and for most of them are potential side effects. So stay tuned. Thank you.